Hello guys and welcome to my new video, and today we'll be looking at the predictions for Mythic Plus meta in terms of the best classes when looking at the tanks, DPS and healers. And of course, this video, like many other prediction videos, have a disclaimer in terms of anything can change, in terms of a lot of these rankings are based for high Mythic Plus pushers, for MDI teams, for world first keys, and I can see why a lot of people want to see prediction videos, because if they want to re-roll the Blizzard's Essence grind is somewhat substantial for new classes, and also the fact that Mythic Plus is going to be relatively hard at the start of 8.3, because again, you need a plus 15 key to do or get the maximum weekly chest reward. Plus 15 is going to feel a lot harder because of how Mythic Plus scales. I see the need for these prediction videos, but keep in mind not everything is set in stone. So first of all, this is going to be a relatively long video, because the first part of the video I'm going to look through the new Mythic Plus Affix Awaken. It used to be called Corrupted. I'll be looking at the findings to do with the stealth classes and how different classes are going to be affected. If you want to skip this, you can go straight to the ranking, but I advise you to check out how different classes are going to be affected by this new Mythic Plus Affix. So let's get started. Let's look at Awaken. So Awaken is going to have multiple different spires or pillars spawned in a Mythic Plus dungeon. These pillars, when activated, you can only activate them if you're not in combat. If you're in combat, you can't click it. But once you activate it, you'll be transferred to a new realm, Azeroth's realm, and there's going to be Azeroth's lieutenants. These mobs are going to have special abilities, and they have different abilities based on which spire you click. Now, the interesting part that I found is that some of these spires, or at least in the dungeons that I tested, 1 or 2 spires can be soloed, as in you can activate them without pulling any trash mobs around them. So that becomes a lot easier if you're a stealth class like a rogue, druid, or a hunter with camouflage, or maybe using mage invisibility. You can use these abilities to get to the spire and activate it. So this provides multiple different skips. Let's take Ataldazar as an example. There's a spire on the left and there's a spire on the right. You can tell your group to go to the left and activate that spire, while as a druid or rogue or whatever, you can go to the right spire, bypass the mobs with stealth, and activate the pillar and get transformed into this Azeroth realm. This is gonna spawn a lieutenant. You can bring this lieutenant back to your group, which also gonna have a second lieutenant. You can utilize cleave DPS. You'll be fighting multiple lieutenants at the same time. This was one of the complaints from a lot of Mythic Plus pushers, is that you can only fight 1 lieutenant and there's not a lot of mobs. This way you can get 2. So this is very, very important for Mythic Plus balance. Freehold, you have 1 spire at the very start, which has no mobs around it, and then there's a second spire beside the second boss, which can be soloed by anybody, but it becomes easier if you're a stealth class. So you do the same thing. You tell your group to activate the first spire and get the first lieutenant, while you as a druid, a rogue, hunter, or mage run to the second spire, click it again, run away from the mob. The mob is gonna chase you, go to the first boss. This is where your group is killing these lieutenants. Kill the lieutenants, exit the realm through the portals that the lieutenants spawn, kill the first boss. After you kill the first boss, you can enter the realm again and bypass all the mobs to the second boss, or close to the second boss. Because again, you have to remember, you kill 2 lieutenants, you got 2 different portals. You can exit Azeroth's realm through these spires if you kill the lieutenant. So all of a sudden, not only you're optimizing cleave DPS, AoE DPS, but you're also doing these incredible skips. And I feel if a lot of dungeons are gonna have this possibility, stealth classes who can do this skip, who can do it fast without losing too much DPS, are going to be really, really strong. Rogues. Let's go look at another option, and that is hard CC. Now, there's going to be certain spires that are going to have mobs around them, and maybe you don't want to kill these mobs. Maybe you want to bypass them. You can use hard CC, especially CC that does not put you in combat due to proximity, rogue sap, or demon hunters in prison. If you don't have these CC available, you can use other abilities and use Monk's Ring of Peace to push them back and enter the spire without killing any of the mobs. So hard CC again is going to be relatively strong for certain spire skips when you don't want to kill the mobs and things like that. Now keep in mind, I have tested Shroud of Concealment and Invisibility Potion in terms of, can I use Shroud as a group and activate the spire without pulling? You cannot. The second you activate the spire in stealth, you are brought out of stealth. So you can't use Invisibility Potions or Shroud of Concealment to do these insane skips, but you can use Shroud to get to the mobs beside the Spire. So Shroud still has some viability in these Mythic Plus pushes. So now with this information, let's look at class balance and let's start with my predictions for tanks. And a lot of the people have been talking about different tanks emerging, and I feel tank balance is actually going to be really good for 8.3, but I feel the safe bet is probably going to be Prot Warrior, because Prot Warrior was the second best tank in 8.25. A lot of people were running Prot Warrior. They were behind Brewmaster, but Brewmaster is receiving nerfs in terms of stagger, in terms of their self-sustain. There's going to be a bug that's going to be fixed. So a lot of people have been saying that Brewmaster is going to lose out on its top tanking spot in Mythic Plus, because again, Ring of Peace might have less viability than it had in Beguiling, where you could snap packs away from beguiling mobs. Ring of Peace still seems to have a lot of utility, but maybe not as much as in Beguiling season. So you could argue that there is going to be a shuffle in Mythic Plus, but a lot of people have been talking about Prot Paladins. A lot of people have been talking about Guardian Druids maybe making a comeback, maybe Blood DKs making a comeback, because Blood DKs are looking to be like the strongest raid tank in 8.3 due to magic damage and how well they scale at the end of expansion, and maybe they're going to be completely self-sustained. So there is a lot of predictions in terms of every tanking spec making a comeback in Mythic Plus. Even Vengeance Demon Hunters have been talking about certain builds, certain talent builds, but I feel there is a lot of disadvantages when it comes to making a choice for a Vengeance Demon Hunter for extra survivability or extra DPS in terms of their talents. So I'm not quite sure about that yet, but again, statistically speaking, Prot Warriors are looking to be like a sure bet or a very good bet, but I will not be surprised if there's going to be some underdog classes coming into this Mythic Plus meta. I feel overall Mythic Plus tanking meta seems very, very good in terms of any tank can really emerge. You could argue that maybe if you're doing this 2 N'Zoth Lieutenant pull, and you might have your Resto Druid go and pull a Spire or solo Spire because you don't want to lose too much DPS, having a tank that has a lot of self-sustain or group sustain could be argued as a really positive thing, so keep that in mind. But overall, I feel Mythic Plus balance for tanks is looking pretty good when coming into 8.3. So now let's go look at DPS, and we're going to be looking at melee DPS first. And unfortunately, this section, the whole DPS section for 8.3, at least in my predictions, is looking very unchanged. A lot of the classes that were strong in 8.25 are still looking to be very strong for 8.3. You could argue the fact that rogues would lose some of their viability because of Shroud. Shroud will still have uses, but rogues still have that really strong stealth. They have distract, they have ways of dropping combat, which can be very strong. Even when you pull these N'Zoth Lieutenants, you can drop combat and they'll still be there. So there's going to be multiple ways to utilize your rogue, especially rogues also have hard CC. So rogue is still going to be one of the top tier DPS. And I feel there's going to be at least one, maybe two in one of these MDI teams if they're going to utilize this lieutenant or 2 lieutenant pulls. After that, you're probably going to be looking again. Demon Hunter. Demon Hunter, or at least Havoc Demon Hunter, is looking extremely strong in terms of the utility that it provides. It still has hard CC, it has good DPS, it has a lot of things that you can bring to that Mythic Plus melee table. So I still feel Demon Hunter is going to be really strong. And a melee that's kind of been making a comeback in 8.25, that is Fury Warrior. I feel it's still going to be climbing, and I feel Fury Warrior is still going to be a very, very solid pick in that Mythic Plus melee team coming into 8.3. Now, if you look at the ranged, again, if you look at the table for 8.25, I feel the exact same thing is going to happen in 8.3. Maybe Shadow Priests are going to drop a little bit lower because the nerfs are going to affect them in Mythic Plus as well. Shadow Priests are still looking very strong in Raid because the Raid encounters, there's a lot of mobs to deal with. But overall, I feel ranged balance is going to be very, very similar. Now, you could argue the fact that there is certain utility that priests and shamans bring. There is a very annoying, the most annoying N'Zoth Lieutenant that has a magic dispel they'll put out on multiple members in a party team that will fear members. And you can't dispel all of them unless you have Mass Dispel or Tremor Totem. So you could argue that those classes might have extra utility, but I'm not sure if it's going to bring them to the top tier. So if you're looking at the range balance, I feel it's going to be relatively unchanged. Again, classes that have stealth might have extra utility because if you're doing that, you know, solo Spire, 2 Lieutenant kind of pull, they have extra utility. With the exception of maybe Warlock. Warlock was relatively poor in 8.25, and I don't see many changes that are going to impact them in 8.3 in a good way. So I'm not sure how Warlocks are going to deal with Mythic Plus or high Mythic Plus pushes. And Shadow Priest changes and nerfs, They're not looking to be like that big of a deal in raiding situations, but in 5-mans it might impact them a bit more, so I'm not 100% on Shadow Priest yet. So let's look at the Mythic plus healer balance, and to be honest, it's looking very unchanged. Resto Druid is still looking to dominate Mythic plus high key pushing. I know they got a nerf in terms of their master, in terms of their healing. I know they got a nerf in terms of their Sunfire trait damage, but overall the utility they provide is actually insane, especially considering that the new Affix will favor these stealth mobs. So maybe your group will not want to lose too much DPS by having a rogue go and solo aspire, and a druid could do it. And maybe your tank is a Blood DK and can completely self-sustain themselves forever, and you are free to do the spire skip. So you can see how druids are going to be very strong. You could argue the fact that they are losing out something from 8.25 because, again, they had a lot of CC to do with emissaries and things like that. You don't really have to do that anymore, but stealth or stealth classes are looking pretty strong for this Mythic plus Affix unless Blizzard changes some of these things. So Druid is still looking very strong. Another healer that I want to mention is Holy Paladin. Holy Paladin was arguably the second best healer in 8.25. I feel in 8.3 there could be certain comps that could really incorporate Holy Paladin's DPS. For example, Blood Decay with the scaling that it's gonna have in 8.3 with extra item levels might be a complete self-sustained tank, and you don't need to heal the tank that much, and overall you can use healer to DPS, and there is no better DPS healer than Holy Paladin, especially considering that Resto Druids getting their Sunfire trait nerfed and their overall DPS is going to be somewhat affected. So overall you could see certain comps where the tank does not need a lot of healing. Holy Paladin can use their cooldowns like Holy Avenger and Wings to do massive amount of DPS. You can have a rogue go and solo aspire, and Holy Paladin can provide a ton of DPS. So I do see Holy Paladin fitting in somewhere here, but Resto Druid is still looking like the king of Mythic plus pushing. I do feel that Mistweaver will still be used in these MDI posts, especially with the way the crane pulls in these MDI speed runs, but I'm not sure if Mistweaver is going to make a huge dent in these world first Mythic plus keys or this Mythic plus meta just yet. So overall with 8.3, with this new Mythic plus Affix, I feel a lot of things are going to be unchanged. I feel the melee DPS is going to be similar, the range DPS is going to be somewhat similar, healers are going to be somewhat similar. The tanking section is the one that's the most interesting for me, and I feel there's going to be some surprises coming in here. I feel there's going to be some undervalued tanks making a comeback into this Mythic plus meta, and I'm really excited about that. In terms of the new Mythic plus Affix, it feels extremely good. There is so many different routing options that you can do. There's a lot of different ways to utilize stealth classes. There's a lot of different ways to utilize, let's say for example, killing the last boss. You will spawn all the spires or lieutenants that you haven't killed, and you can actually go to the last boss in certain dungeons and do these insane boss fights with multiple lieutenants, and then kind of manage your stealth skips after that. There is so many different ways to utilize this. All of a sudden, old dungeons will feel like brand new, and I feel there is a direct advantage to classes that can do these stealth skips, solo these spires, and there is only few classes who can really do that. And I feel, unfortunately, the meta classes that have always been strong, they've always had additional utility that's always going to keep them strong. So overall, not a whole lot of changes, but the Mythic plus Affix is looking extremely fun. Guys, let me know how you feel about this video. These are predictions, anything can change, there can be patch notes released. If you enjoy the content, please do subscribe, and if you want to see a raid ranking or raid prediction videos, let me know in the comments below. Thank you guys, and I'll see you in my next video.